The wonderful world of Black Clover, filled with magic, action, and cartoonishly bad production issues. This is one of those topics that I would have loved to talk about back when the show was actually airing. Unfortunately, I wasn't making content back then. However, it is fun to look back at some of these interesting productions. I did the same thing for Naruto. Black Clover's production was rough, that much is obvious. And in this video, I'll talk about this collapsing production. Of course, I can't make animation breakdowns for 170 episodes. The only episode I'll talk about in detail is episode 63, for obvious reasons. Black Clover was a long-running show, and some ups and downs in the overall quality is to be expected. However, the drastically different peaks and throws across the episodes, more throws than peaks to be honest, was really noticeable. Why? Well, there's one major reason. Studio Pierrot did not care about Black Clover. And I know that sounds a bit childish, but that is the truth. Of course, Black Clover had very little production time, all shows do at this point, but that's not all. Black Clover did not have a dedicated, stable animation producer. The animation producer wasn't mentally ill, the position was just left vacant for a while. And if some of you don't understand how absurd that is, the job of an animation producer involves managing schedules, getting talent on board, and maintaining communication between the creative team and the studio higher-ups. An animation producer is a crucial element of a smoothly functioning production, and as you might know, Black Clover did not have a smoothly functioning production. So then how did so many young freelancers get involved with this project? How did names like Kai Ikarashi get on board? Well, you can thank the juggling production assistants, as well as director Tatsuya Yoshihara and his personal connections. Tatsuya Yoshihara was easily the most important part of the Black Clover team. Well, of course, he is the series director, at least he was up until episode 153. He was the executive director past that point, but it's not just directorial work. As I said, he pretty much did what an animation producer should have done, contacting talent and using his own personal connections to help this disaster of a production. Here are some of his tweets from back in the day. The series director had to publicly ask people, professionals or amateurs, to join the project. Here's another tweet where he talks about not being able to find animators, animation directors, and storyboard artists. It's depressing really. So a poor schedule coupled with the absence of an animation producer led to so many production issues. It can't possibly get any worse, can it? Oh yes it can. Yes it can. Let me introduce you to Black Clover's in-between crisis. Animation is done in two broad phases, key animation and in-between animation. The key animator draws key frames, which are the pivotal moments within the movement, while the in-between animator draws the frames in between these key frames. Key animation requires a lot more skill, and in-between animation is generally a way of gaining experience. Well, there's this stretch of episodes between episode 8 and episode 66 where every bit of in-between animation had to be outsourced. Pierrot did not assign any in-house in-between animators for 58 episodes straight. Some of the in-between animation was done by series director Tatsuya Yoshihara himself. The series director shouldn't have to juggle between direction, storyboards, production work, and in-between animation for 16 episodes. That is absurd. Of course, outsourcing was a major issue throughout. Staff from Studio Mouse handled second key animation for 24 episodes and 2 openings. They also helped out with key animation and handled production cooperation for another 22 episodes. In fact, assistant and later series director Ayataka Tanemura was originally from Studio Mouse. Jivu Productions had to handle second key animation for 18 episodes. Their in-house staff handled the animation direction for 25 episodes and chief animation direction for 13 episodes. They also handled the in-between animation for a whopping 29 different episodes and key animation for 26 episodes. There are many more of these subcontracted studios that were involved. Outsourcing isn't a foreign concept in the anime industry, but this degree of outsourcing isn't healthy whatsoever. Studio Ammo and Studio Drop, two of these subcontracted studios, had to file for bankruptcy. Of course, that's not because of Black Clover, but these studios dropping out, no pun intended, forced the team to find replacement studios, which only made everything more complicated. So now you have a solid understanding of the issues faced by the production team. There might have been more issues that we don't know of, but it's safe to say everything about this show was a mess. And that brings us to episode 63. I remember watching this episode for the first time. I didn't know much about anime visuals back then, but even I knew something was different about this episode. As Kevin so appropriately described it, it's a memorable fuck you to the industry. Directed and storyboarded by Tatsuya Yoshihara himself, this is one of the most visually interesting episodes that I've ever seen. It opens up with this incredible sequence, the bright red background, the ominous devil with perfect compositing, lighting, the abstract visuals, it's flawless. This entire sequence is animated by Ista Meister, a name that shows up a lot throughout this show, but unfortunately, a lot of his works don't look as good as they should given his talent, simply because of bad schedules leading to rushed work, bad outsourced animation direction, and second key animation. However, this sequence is different. It's 2 minutes and 12 seconds of flawless animation. The drawings, especially the close-ups, are really strong, and this entire sequence is kagenashi, or shadowless, which just makes the line work pop out so much more. The simple background also helps with that. Cut to the real world, we get some lovely effects and character acting animated by Kai Shibata and Hirotaka Yonemori, who also did some passable background animation. Up until this point, this was a normal, good-looking episode. From this point on, oh boy. The next 71 seconds are animated by Shota Goshizono, a name you might be familiar with. He's the new director of Jujutsu Kaisen. He does a lot of Blender-based 3D work in his cuts, and I can hit you with the "you don't understand the brilliance of these backgrounds," but I won't. They look bad. They look really bad. The trees in particular look awful. They have no texture, they look like Play-Doh. This is not a good 3D background by any stretch of the imagination, but this bad background allows the scene to move properly. Of course, a good-looking 3D background could accomplish the same thing and look better, but shut up. Goshizono also plays around a lot with the camera focus. I'm not really aware of different camera lenses, but that's what he's doing, right? The ground is mostly a blank, single-colored flat layer. The scene also hides behind very fast movement and effects. There's this cut where the ground turns into cubes. That was cool. This portion of the episode is incredibly difficult to follow, but goddammit, it's interesting to look at. As I previously mentioned, there was no possible way for the staff to polish the final product. They were severely handicapped and still they pulled through. Goshizono managed to get across the scale of this fight really well, despite how rough a lot of it looks. Also, the characters are often off-model, but the animators do a good job of making these off-model frames look stylized. It's a clever trick. There's a solid scene animated by Shota Sanomiya, even though Asta is really off-model. He's underwater for some of this sequence. Naturally his face warps and you don't really notice the weak drawings, but the final couple of cuts make it obvious. There is this incredible stylized sequence animated and colored by Tatsuhiro Ariyoshi and his mother. The paintbrush aesthetic looks really good. Yusuke Kawakami's sequence follows and it's incredibly ambitious. The background animation goes from quite good to quite bad in the blink of an eye. There are some off-model drawings, a recurring theme throughout this episode. The effects are solid but lack an overall polish, another recurring theme. The CGI is just bad. What is this supposed to be? You can also see a partially cropped out frame number in the top left corner. They forgot to take it out. This episode didn't have a good schedule, by the way. The sequence does get the speed across really well, which was the main priority. This cut of background animation has so many moving elements, including the birds. This whole sequence is so unique it almost makes you forget about the CGI nothing that pops up here and there. There's a lovely sequence animated by Gem with incredible effects. This episode uses a lot of Kutsuna lightning, which is this wavy style of lightning commonly used by younger webgen animators. Kosuke Kato animated one of the best sequences in this episode, with this hardcore Kannada style. The snappy timing and the stylized faces allowed him to bypass a lot of the issues this episode otherwise faced. Gem, Pebble and Till's sequence is that textbook modern fast style of action, with extremely energetic movements, stunning effects, and incredibly fast background animation, with this unprocessed thick line work. It's the kind of stuff you see in those YouTube fan animations in the best possible way. Some good looking shots of Asta in his partially demonic state can be seen. There are some strong drawings around this part. Kai Ikarashi's animation follows, and it's the best looking sequence in the entire episode. Ikarashi's work is only 8 seconds long, but he does so much. He brings out a proper Kannada style of animation, with extremely snappy timing, energetic character arcs, and incredible background animation, effects, and debris. He even brings out the Kannada dragon, which is a reference to animator Yoshinori Kanada, who came up with this style. Ikarashi's work is followed by Toru Iwasawa. This episode had a lot of handicaps, but a lack of talent wasn't one of them. Iwasawa's work starts off with a good-looking walk cycle and these incredible thick outlines on the debris. A good chunk of his sequence involves beams flying around, but we get this amazing impact frame sequence near the end. The background was really well coordinated throughout the aerial parts of this fight. The drawings were really strong as well. There's some amazing character acting animated by Yuki Yamashita and Yuitsuku Sakabe. The loose drawings and the comedic timing really stands out in a good way. This sequence is a lot of fun to look at. The episode isn't over yet. Gem's sequence is so cool, and the amount of moving elements on screen is really impressive. The close-ups of the crows look absolutely insane and really ominous. The effects and the background animation looks really good, and the amazing rotation shot that follows is animated by Kaito Tomioka. Also, more character acting with a loose style can be seen, however, this one is far from comedic. It's the same concept, but this time around it looks like Asta is falling apart, which is exactly how it's supposed to look. A heavily stylized cut follows, which looks absolutely incredible. Lots of Kutsuna lightning handled by Gem, and more of that loose character acting can be seen. There's some good looking liquid animation animated on ones, and besides the crows in the background, Hayato Nishimaki's sequence looks really good, with lots of Kutsuna lightning. The final sequence is animated by Tatsuya Yoshihara himself. Asta isn't particularly on model, but the effects and the character acting is really good. Yoshihara didn't animate an action scene, which is surprising. And that brings us to the end of this episode. It was bold. Was it a flawless episode? Absolutely not. Did this episode look consistent? Oh god no. But was this episode interesting? You bet. It's not exactly the same concept as the Naruto vs Pain episode. That was unique on purpose. This episode was unique because the staff had no other choice. But still, I would take this over the safe limited animation with strong drawings approach any day. So did this episode change anything? Well, sort of. In-house in-between animators started showing up again from episode 66 onwards, but that was obviously not enough. Yoshihara had to handle the in-between animation himself for several episodes past this point. But every once in a while, the team could show off a little, especially with episodes 84, 100, 151, 166, 167, and 170. Episode 151 was probably the most flawless looking episode in the entire series, while the final fight from episodes 166 and 167 were rough looking with some bad digital elements and poor choreography. The very final fight did look quite good. And that is the story of Black Clover, a production team that faced every possible roadblock but still somehow managed to hang in there, although just barely. The upcoming Black Clover movie will probably look good. It has a movie schedule, but if the TV anime ever returns as a long-running anime or as a seasonal release, I hope it will have the backing it needs. That's about it. Speaking of seasonal releases, check out my watch list for the spring season. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time.